Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Welcome to the fourth installment of our Field to Fork webinar series. Thank you all for joining us this evening, joining us virtually this evening. I'll introduce our two presenters here in just a moment. My name is Brent McCarty. I'm an R3 specialist with the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. I'm going to be kind of managing the chatter tonight. I'm going to be jumping around, muting everybody if they accidentally get off mute, and then reading the chat down below. Some of you have already done this for me. If you haven't already, please go into the chat and put your name and where you're from so that we know who you are and we can keep a roster for tonight. If you have questions throughout the program tonight, put them in the chat. I'll be reading the chat, and if I feel like they're like really good to have it right now, I'll interrupt the speakers and read the question off to them. Or if it's one that I think maybe we'll wait towards the end when we have more time for bigger questions, then we'll do that too. So just put your questions in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on that, and we'll see what all we can come up with tonight. So without too much further ado, though, I do want to make sure everybody remembers that this is being recorded. So we're going to try our hardest to provide this for you all later. Right now, we still haven't even gotten week one out yet, but we're working on it. Also, don't forget to sign up for the rest of the webinar series. Remember, we still have 2 weeks left leading up towards modern firearm season for deer. And you've already got the link, I think, twice now from me on how to register for those. So don't forget to go on and register for those after tonight. So, okay. And one other thing I think, Elizabeth, you asked me to tell them was make sure that you guys know how to pin a video. So as our speakers start talking, if you all want to make sure that you're looking solely at their screens and no one else's screens, you can actually kind of highlight their screen, and there will be a 3 little bars or 3 little dots that pop up. If you click on the 3 little dots, it will give you a bunch of options, and one of the options is to pin the video, which means that you will be seeing that person's screen the entire time. Now, the thing you need to remember, though, is when somebody else starts talking, if you don't want to be looking at that person anymore, you need to unpin or pin the next video. You can just put it on speaker view, but if anybody jumps off mute by accident, it'll sometimes have their screen pop up. All right, our speakers for tonight, we have 2 tonight, and they're joining us from 2 different locations. It's really exciting. We have, first of all, Elizabeth Coots. Elizabeth is joining us via computer and phone tonight, right? Elizabeth?
Yep.
She is the.
Oh,
Hang on. Well, Elizabeth, go ahead and introduce yourself.
okay, sure. So can you hear me okay? Because I moved my phone.
We can hear you.
Okay, so I am Elizabeth Coots. I am the Woodford County Extension Agent for Family and Consumer Sciences. That's where I am, here at the Woodford County Extension Office in Versailles. If you're not familiar, the Extension Service is part of the University of Kentucky, the College of Agriculture, Food and Environment. There's an extension office in every county in Kentucky, which is a little rare. So everything I'm going to be doing and talking about tonight, there is somebody in your local community, assuming everybody is from Kentucky. You might not, there might be some from out of state. I think we at least have Indiana represented. But if you're from a different state, every state does have an extension service. So that may have been a long intro, but that's who I am and what I do.
That was absolutely perfect. Thank you, Elizabeth. And we do have a partnership going on with these guys. So I need to do a little plug for Elizabeth and her crew. They're doing a Facebook Live series. And I think later on, I've got it pulled up already. I will share the link to the Facebook Live series that UK Cooperative Extension is doing. So Elizabeth is going to be doing some cooking for us tonight with deer. She's going to get it prepped. Then we're going to jump over while it cooks to our second presenter for the evening. And Joe, why don't you go ahead? Joe Lacefield, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'm Joe Lacefield. I'm a private lands wildlife biologist. I've been with the agency for over 30 years now. I took my first deer when I was 15. and that was 1980. So my very first deer, my dad told me how to do things, and I had to do it on my own. So ever since then, I've done it for most other people. So I guess I'm gonna have to start letting my son, who's 7, who took his first 2 deer. Next year, he's gonna have to do his own field dressing. We'll see how that goes. Anyway, I've been an avid deer hunter for that long. I started bow hunting soon after, and I haven't gun hunted deer since 1990. Recently, I'm more into traditional bow hunting and even make my own bows to hunt with. So it's been quite a journey.
Joe. And so we will come back to Joe here in a little bit. Elizabeth will do the first part of her spiel, and then Joe will chime in, and then once the food's done cooking, Elizabeth will take back over again. And for those of you all that have ever taken one of my deer processing classes, that is my version of Joe's deer processing class. Yeah, Elizabeth was the one who took that. I watched Joe do it, and then I turned around and taught it. So if you all are watching Joe and you say, well, Brent said to do it this way, do it the way Joe said, because he's the real expert. I got my stuff from him. So Elizabeth, and again, y'all, she's got audio coming from one window, but she's got video coming from the other. So you might want to try to pin her video. Again, highlight her on the screen. You'll see the 3 little dots, and when it pops up, you'll see where it says to pin video. So Elizabeth, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, all right. And thanks for that. I'm glad you said that, because after I was talking, I was like, oh, if they have it on speaker, or that other one, you're just gonna see my face, not me cooking. And actually, I am going to pin my own video so that I can see what you see. All right, well, thank you. I'm glad to have the first segment here of cooking. I'm gonna, like Brent said, I'm gonna get this started, and then while Joe's doing his part, I'm actually gonna cook, and then we'll all get to taste, meaning just me. I'm gonna have a lot to eat tonight and tomorrow, and probably I'm gonna have to freeze some of the things that I'm making because I have 2 batches here. So I'm gonna be making tonight deer camp breakfast sausage, but before I get into the actual recipe, I want to tell you a little bit about the recipe cards. And actually, I am going to, if I can do this multitasking, yes, I'm going to put in the chat a website where that I'm going to refer to. So this is a cooperation, I guess, between many entities. These recipe cards, you may have seen them or heard them. This is a program or an effort, I guess, called Cookwild Kentucky. It's a partnership between the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources, the Nutrition Education Program, which is through the University of Kentucky Extension Service, as well as the University of Kentucky Extension Service. These are recipes that have been put together. It's been a long time coming to make not only healthier wild game recipes easier, but it really started from when Hunters for the Hungry were providing ground venison to food pantries across Kentucky. And a lot of the people that came into the food pantry and were offered, this ground venison didn't want it, or they weren't sure how to cook it. Because if you've ever cooked with wild game, it cooks a little differently. You can't cook it exactly the same as you can maybe a beef or a pork. So with discussion with Hunters for the Hungry and all these entities, this project came out of that, really to help the folks that are coming to the food pantry to know how to cook that ground venison. And it just kind of blossomed from there. So now we have this whole series of Cookwild Kentucky recipe cards that are available at your local extension office in Kentucky. Every extension office has these cards. And of course, with COVID, a lot of the offices are closed, but hopefully soon enough, you'll be able to go and get these cards. Right now, there are 17, and hot off the press in my office, I think there's 9 new ones, just highlighting all different kinds of game in Kentucky. But all of the recipes, except for the new ones, are on the website that I put in the chat, so you can check it out there. That is the Nutrition Education Program website through the extension service. So deer camp sausage. I've made this before, and this is a really good recipe. If you are a hunter, or if you have venison provided to you and you have ground venison, this is a really good sausage to make. So in that link also, I think the third recipe over is this actual recipe. So if you wanted to, to go on there and look at it, or, just listen and look at it later. So the recipe calls for 2 pounds of ground venison and 1 pound of ground pork. So venison is very lean. It's a very healthy meat, but because it's very lean, it cooks differently. So when we have something like sausage, we want to add a little fat to it, and good fat, because also if you know, or if you don't know, the fat in venison doesn't have that umami flavor like beef or pork fat does. So that's why we have ground pork that's added to this. And I'll make a little disclaimer here, and this is me being totally honest, because if you were here, you could probably tell, but if I didn't tell you, you wouldn't know. So the venison that I had, I thawed it out a little too soon for grinding. So when you grind venison, you want it to be somewhat frozen. It grinds a little bit more consistently. And if you look, and I don't even think I could hold it up to the camera because the pieces are so small, but if you look in this ground meat, you can see that there's a little bit bigger chunks, like some of the pieces, like the full pieces of meat got through the grinder. And that's because the venison was almost thawed by the time I ground it. So when you grind your venison, just make sure that it is somewhat frozen. You don't want it to be an icicle, but you don't want it to be thawed out. So just so you know when you grind your meat. So essentially we have 3 pounds of meat here, and you might play around with different ratio. If you wanted it to be all venison, you might have a hockey puck, and it might not be as flavorful, but you can play around with that ratio. So we have 3 pounds of meat here, and I have already mixed it together. So we are going to add, and the recipe, I'll tell you this too, I'm going to switch some things around in the recipe, just a couple things. So the directions say to combine the meat and the seasonings, and then to add the egg, and then add the breadcrumbs. Okay, and this is all going to be mixed together, kind of like a meatloaf, or if you were doing meatballs or something like that. But I think it's a little more consistent if we add all the dry seasonings over in a little bowl, and then we mix it together. Okay, so in this little bowl over here, I'm going to add a teaspoon of dried oregano, or you can use marjoram. I have a tablespoon of dried sage, a tablespoon of dried basil, and of course it smells wonderful already just with those spices, a teaspoon of dry mustard, a teaspoon of salt, and a half a teaspoon of black pepper. It's going to go in here. And then I'm just going to kind of just mix all that together, and I'm going to add to that my breadcrumbs, which is 1/4 cup of breadcrumbs. So I'm just going to mix that together in here. And one thing with the breadcrumbs, so again, full disclosure, if you were here, you could probably tell, but you're not. So if I'd never told you, you wouldn't know. But when I went to get the breadcrumbs, there were no plain breadcrumbs. So these are actually Italian breadcrumbs. So I'm not sure how this is going to turn out. I think it's going to be fun. It smells wonderful. But you can certainly do Italian, and you can certainly, play with this recipe. This is one that, it's not like we're making yeast bread and you have to follow it exactly. I'm very much a proponent of make it how you like it or how your family likes it. If there's something else that you want to add, or a seasoning that you don't really like, if you wanted it to be a little spicy, I would personally put, maybe some red pepper flakes or some cayenne pepper in it just to give it a little heat. So then this is going to be combined in here. And I already have the pork and the venison all mixed in together here. And then I have an egg over here, and I'm just going to whisk it just a little bit here. Just makes it a little easier to incorporate, since we're not mixing it into, other wet ingredients. We're just mixing it into the meat. So that is just all going to go in here. And if you have kids, they love this part because you get to put your hands in and get dirty. And just for purposes of today, I'm going to use gloves, partly because I don't want to have to run and wash my hands right in the middle of this. So mixing this together takes a little bit, takes a little arm work and squeezing. One thing I would say though too, when you're doing this, and I didn't say this when I put all of the dry ingredients on, rather than just dump the dry ingredients on, if you kind of sprinkle them, that helps to incorporate it. So you just mix this together and then you would form your patties. So with the magic of virtual, I have patties over here already patted out. Now, the recipe for this, for the sausage says that it says shape into 16 patties. Now, I'll have to count as I cook them, but this is way more than 16 patties, and these are pretty big patties. I mean, I usually think of, maybe 3 inches or so of a sausage patty. These are probably about 4 inches maybe, and I'd say it made over 20. I'll count them and let you know, but it definitely made more than the recipe says. So I am going to cook these here in the skillet, and so you don't have to watch me cook. I wish you could smell. I wish we had smell-o-vision. I'm going to turn it over to Joe to do his part, and then we'll come back at the end and we'll finish up.
All right, let me see if I can get her unpinned and see what's going on here. All right. My primary topic today is going to be field care, field dressing, big game. And this applies to both deer and elk. It's something that you don't always have to take the guts out, though. If you're in a situation where you know you're not going to be packing the animal out, it's sometimes best to use the gutless method. And why field dress it when you're just going to quarter it up, bone it out, and pack it out anyway? And most people traditionally want to get the deer out whole so they can take more pictures with it in other places, and that's all fine. But if you're really concerned about taking care of the meat, sometimes boning it out quickly and getting it cooled off quickly are the most important factors. I am going to go to some photos. Everybody see that?
Good job, Joe.
Am I still muted?
Hope you're good.
All right. All right, as I mentioned, once you've harvested an animal, then there's field care. And anytime you're dealing with this, there's going to be some blood. So unfortunately, that's just the way it is. Proper tools are the most important factors in doing this and doing it correctly. I'm stuck here, so I'm having trouble getting it to move. All right. This is a knife with a gut hook. It's intended to be able to put in the belly part, the soft part of the skin, and cut without cutting the organs. You're basically using it upside down compared to a normal knife. This does have a sharp blade on the other side. This is a Wyoming knife, similar concept. There are several different types of knives that can be used to do this. You can simply use a regular knife, put your index finger over the tip, and be very careful as you're cutting. Um, you're keeping your finger between basically the entrails and the knife tip. This works fairly well, but it takes a lot of practice. Simple solution: put some duct tape over the tip of the knife. One way to do that. And my favorite solution is this knife called a swing blade. They are awesome for gutting animals. My pack when I'm hunting typically has gloves, baby wipes, a drag handle and rope. That's just a fitting from a plumbing supply with some heavy duty rope. And paracord. You might be in terrain where you need to secure the animal, hold a leg up. If you don't have someone there to help you, paracord can be a lifesaver. These gauntlets that are used for livestock palpitation, they're OB gloves, disposable, are awesome if you want to keep the smell, the blood off of your clothing. And that's something that a lot of people like to use. I sometimes have those available. Sometimes I don't, but they're pretty handy. Just put your latex gloves over top of them, and it holds them in place because they have sort of big floppy fingers like what Elizabeth was using when she was mixing the sausage earlier. And the latex gloves will hold those to your hands and make it a simple task. So in field dressing, you're removing the entrails. And this, where I'm feeling here is where the sternum is located. You feel the belly go up where the soft tissue ends and the cartilage and the ribs start. And I always make a cut where those ribs are to get under the skin, and then use my gut hook or swing blade or put my fingertip over the knife blade to make an incision all the way to the rear legs. I don't split the rear legs at this time. I don't open the deer up any more than I need to, just because as I'm dragging it, I don't want to get dirt and debris inside the animal. So I make as small of a cut there in the belly as I have to get the entrails out. You also need to cut around the anus and make sure that you're able to pull as you take the guts out. It will allow you to pull that through, and you're not leaving that area closed. You want this animal to cool out as quickly as possible. So once I've made those incisions, those three, cut around the anus, from the legs up to the sternum, I basically then start to move the stomach and intestines to the side. And at this point, you'll have to reach up inside and cut the diaphragm. The diaphragm needs to be cut all the way around so that you can then pull the stomach and heart and lungs out. You'll have to cut the heart and lungs off up near the esophagus, and everything will come out cleanly. So that's how you field dress a deer. If you were doing this gutless, you have two options. If you wanted to save the hide, you would cut on the inside of each leg one at a time and remove a leg on, the front leg on the upside, the rear leg on the upside, and then you would roll the animal over and do the other two legs and the back strap last. And then when you're finished, you can go in and get the inner tenderloin. One advantage to doing the gutless method is you don't attract the flies nearly as quickly, and it's very important, especially when dealing with early season and elk hunts. Keeping the flies out and keeping from puncturing any of the intestines is also critically important. You don't want the bacteria in your meat. You don't want that accelerated. Now, a lot of people will say put water on it. unless it's a really bad rupture of the stomach, I don't advise putting water on it because it rapidly accelerates the bacterial growth. But sometimes if you have made a bad shot or if you've accidentally punctured the stomach, you're going to have to if you're going to save anything inside the animal. Again, for the gutless method, if you're not trying to save the hide, I always unzip the back right down the spine and skin it off that way. Anytime you're cutting the hair, if possible, you want to cut from the inside, not across the hair. It dulls the knife quickly, and cutting from underneath doesn't leave as much loose hair. You want to avoid having hair flying everywhere and sticking to your exposed muscle tissue. In the gutless method, what you'll do is remove large muscle groups from the hindquarters, and that's basically, they're delineated by silver skin, usually easy to spot. Sometimes they can be really fat and harder to notice. That's it in a nutshell, and I really want to get into questions and talk about what people might experience or questions they might have. And I ended my slides here with the biggest deer I ever missed with a longbow. So feel free to bring on questions, Brent.
Well, we haven't gotten any questions. Oh wait, yes, hang on. There was one earlier. Let's see. There's been a lot of chatter about how to pin a video on an iPhone. I apologize. I wasn't prepared for that question. And folks, are you all, Lori Shoup and Lisa Fry, are you seeing me talk right now? Or are you seeing nod if you're seeing Joe talk right now? No, nod if you're seeing me talk right now. Okay, y'all are both going two, and I don't know what the nod means. Okay. Lisa, unmute yourself.
I see the picture of his deer. I see you on the side.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can see both of you talk. Both of you are highlighted when you start talking. So we see both of you talk on the side of the screen, and then we see the picture of his deer in the large portion of the screen.
Very good. Okay, thank you. I highlighted Joe's video earlier, and I will highlight Elizabeth's whenever she starts talking again. I think that's what's going on here. Thank you very, very much. So, Joe, we got some questions. Do you have any videos to show us?
I don't. Unfortunately, I'm usually the one doing the work and don't have as many photos as I should have to prepare for this. I apologize for that.
You're a biologist, not a videographer, right?
This is true.
Okay, good question here, John. How do you get the inner tenderloins out with the gutless method? I'm really curious about that myself.
So after you've skinned away and taken the back straps and the side and the quarters off, you basically then have that soft spot between the ribs and where the back legs were that you can cut along the face of the rib, I guess the spine, that's sticking out sideways, the flat vertebrae. And once you cut through that soft tissue, that's basically the sides of the animal, you can peel that away and move the entrails away while you cut the inner tenderloins out. It's actually easier than cutting them out from an animal that's been field dressed, if that makes sense to you. And I apologize for not having photos of that.
Donna missed. Oh, John had a follow-up question. Can you get the heart the same way?
You can. Again, you would have to go through the sternum and just reach up in there and cut the heart out, and the liver, of course. If you were going to take the heart and liver, I would go on and field dress it if it were me. But you could do it the gutless method just to keep the flies down until you're ready to finish up. And another thing, if you are having to deal with flies, black pepper is awesome. You can just coarse black pepper, sprinkle it all over the meat, and the flies will avoid it. It's one way to deal with warm temperature issues.
Very interesting. Okay, Donna says her question got answered already. She had a question about the the duct tape on the tip of the knife, but you answered that for us. It's a good deal. Let's see here. Kyle shared, I love that meat eater video yeah, I've seen that a couple times. Kyle, that's a good one. Yeah, very good. Anybody else have any questions for Joe? Elizabeth, give me a nod if you're getting close to being ready. Yeah.
I just took my finger and put it on the end of my little knife and run it right up his belly. This year I plan on taking the axe out there with me, and I'm gonna axe him up this part because it was.
Oh. Muted you, Donna. Are we hearing you? We are.
I got volunteer firefighters that live here. That was the tones going off.
Now
But
that makes sense.
Can you take an axe and like cut it?
So I guess I'm not sure you can certainly use an axe to cut.
Well, I take my knife
pelvis.
and I cut his butt, and then I run all the way up to like where his bones.
Right here where the ribs start.
Yeah, but then to get all up in there and cut that esophagus and the diaphragm, I was up to my shoulders inside him. So
Okay.
I thought if I take an axe or hatchet, whack his bones up there, I can spread him open.
So the answer to that is if you try to go up the center, it's really, you can't hardly do it with a knife, but there's a cartilage area where those ribs have some flexibility into the sternum. There's a band of cartilage that you can cut right through with a knife if you go to one or the other side.
Okay.
Up towards the brisket.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. But a hatchet would be a thing to do that with, or a saw. Some people, like I pointed out, the Wyoming knife. There's a Wyoming saw that's collapsible, and it fits in a pack on your belt.
I'm hunting 200 yards from my garage. I can take a sawzall and go out there and go at it.
Well, there you go. You could certainly do that.
Yeah, he just won't let me hang a dead deer in the garage.
What about a live one?
No, the dogs would not go for that.
Thank you, Donna. Anybody else got any questions for Joe before we jump over to Elizabeth? No? All right, so I'm going to unhighlight. I want to stop it. I just want to.
I'm going to stop sharing so you can do whatever you want there.
I'm going to cancel the highlight on your video, and then I'm going to highlight the video of Elizabeth in the kitchen. So hopefully everybody's looking at her in the kitchen.
And can you hear me?
I can hear you.
You can hear me. Okay. So I really wish that you all could smell. I wish, that old smell-o-vision. I wish we had that. Because it smells really good, and I'm going to taste these and let you know how it is. But one thing I forgot to mention from earlier, the recipe also calls for a 1/4 cup of olive oil, and I had that here, and that is for just to put in your skillet when you are cooking the sausage. So you could even use, a cooking spray if you wanted, and you don't necessarily have to measure out the oil. I think that this is probably too much oil to use, just as long as your pan is coated and so that your sausages don't stick. And if you're using, like I would use at home, a cast iron skillet that's been well seasoned for several years, you're not going to have to put any oil in that pan anyways. So let's see if I can hold these up to the camera here so you all can drool over them. Do you smell them, Donna? And so I'm not going to obviously have time to cook all of these. I cooked, let's see, 8 there, but I counted, and this recipe made 22 pretty good size, as you see. Oh, here, let me hold that. I know you don't know how big my hand is, but woo! Well, here, I'll just put it in my hand. It's not like I'm gonna be feeding it to you. Pretty good size sausages here. So 22, the recipe says it makes 16. So I'm just gonna taste this like they do on TV. And then they're like, it's so good, which it is really good. I also have leftover eggs. Since there was one egg in this recipe, I had a cooking segment earlier where I made pumpkin bread. That's why the pumpkins are behind me. It's because I had a Facebook Live earlier on pumpkins. But I think we're gonna have breakfast tomorrow here at the office. Joe, if you're gonna be here, I wanna see your kids. Hi, Ashton, hi, Samara in the background. So something else that I wanted to mention about this recipe, I am not very good about making uniform patties, uniform balls, and then making them into a patty. So a trick is to use maybe an ice cream scooper, or like I have this measuring cup. It's a 1/3 of a cup measuring cup. You can scoop it out just to make sure that your patties are consistent. Not that it really matters, but I don't know, having them cook consistently, really helps in that aspect. So that is the Deer Camp sausage, Deer Camp breakfast sausage, Cookwild Kentucky recipe. And I hope you check out the other recipes. Like I said, the new recipes aren't on the website yet, but they will be there soon. And unless there's any questions specifically about this recipe, I want to give a little plug. And I know, Brent, you said you were going to talk about this, but we are doing a series that started yesterday's Wednesday, called Cookwild Wednesday. And it's going to be on the Kentucky Nutrition Education Program Facebook page. And I didn't think to copy that and paste it in the chat.
I already did, Elizabeth.
You did? Okay, awesome.
Yes.
Thank you. So Cookwild Wednesdays is going to be featuring these recipes. We have frog and dove and rabbit, of course, venison, fish that will be featured. It'll be every Wednesday until December 9th is the last one. And extension agents like myself are going to be cooking these recipes. Yesterday, we had the FCS agent in Mercer County did a segment on Facebook Live, and it's on there if you want to watch it, on canning venison, which I've taught that in classes before. Actually, with the Field to Fork, we've done that here at the extension office before. These recipes cannot be canned, and she gives a little disclaimer of that, but just want you to know that these recipes are just for cooking. Canning venison is a whole nother ball game, or canning wild game is a whole nother ball game. But I hope that you check out the Cookwild Wednesdays series. It'll be at noon on that Kentucky Nutrition Education Program Facebook page. So, yeah, Donna?
Those recipes couldn't be canned, but the sausage one can be vacuum packed and froze, right?
Oh, yes. Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, you can definitely freeze this.
And that'd be like way too much.
Yes, yes. Well, and since I have, I basically made 2 batches of this, I have this sausage mixture here that I haven't even cooked. I know what I'm going to be doing tomorrow. So, and there's no way that even my whole office will eat this before it goes bad. So we're probably going to be freezing some Deer Camp breakfast sausage around here. So
I'm going to, my family friend used to process deer. We're going to do mine this year, and I don't have to worry about a stuffer or anything, a grinder or anything like that, but he's no longer doing it for the general public. So I'm trying to learn, to do it myself. So he don't have to show me how.
Yeah. Well, good. Well, I hope it works out for you.
Oh, it will.
Yeah. But yeah, definitely. And really, in thinking about a lot of these recipes that we have, the Cookwild Kentucky recipes, a lot of them can be frozen. I mean, there's stews. I know there's a meatloaf, there's fish. So yeah, definitely. They just can't be canned.
My kid just likes the straight meat. Throw it on the grill, throw it on the plate. He don't want anything else done to it.
Like
easy to please.
So we have a friend that has a Cabela's grinder. And we've been very fortunate that at the end of every hunting season, we've been, joined them, and we've grinded all of our meat, And then we added all the spices in to make the most amazing breakfast sausage, country sausage, and just plain ground venison.
Yeah.
And we put that up every year. But Cabela's has a grinder that is amazing.
Yes, yes, they do. And actually, I used probably the grinder you're talking about. I borrowed it from Fish and Wildlife. So yeah, I do know how good of a grinder it is. But like I said, you just have to make sure your meat is not completely thawed.
I would
Okay, I
probably
am
be
going
doing
to.
mine fresh
Well,
and
the
not
grinder,
putting it in the freezer.
the grinder itself causes enough temperature to make the meat not go through, thaws it out. So that's semi-thaw or frozen, because the grinding process causes heat and it stops it up, stops the grinder up.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
All right, I'm
I-
going to I'm going to highlight, see if I can spotlight Joe and Elizabeth both here. I think we can do it. No, we can't. We can do one or the other. Okay. Well, so who has questions for our two experts? Well, we've got them for the next. Gosh, we still got some time. 19 minutes. Anybody have any questions for Joe and or Elizabeth?
I'm hungry.
Well,
Joe, I have a questions.
Okay.
You know, if you go ahead and, I mean, I've been cleaning deer for probably 30 years now, and I've gone through every one of the videos of people, how they do it, and, you know, breaking the pelts, but that leaves sharp bone that you can cut yourself on. I found that bringing my fillet knife, my fish fillet knife, is easy to get the anus out. Because that's the most important thing, I think, to do right away. But once you get back to the cabin with your deer or wherever you're going, and my brother can skin them with that Wyoming knife in about 30 minutes, not even 30 seconds. I mean, he can go around the neck and pull it down and step on it with his feet. We've got the hide off. But what is your major cuts of meat? Do you take the hind legs off, back legs off, front legs off, or you just go ahead and bone it?
So if you're going to hang it at all, I mean, I hang it by one back leg, and I typically take the shoulders off first and fillet the meat off the shoulders. Then I'll take the hanging free hind leg, take that quarter off, or just simply cut the muscle groups off that leg and leave the bone intact. At which point now I'll go in and take the back straps and take the major muscle groups off of that last hind quarter. I cut down about 3 inches from where that tendon attaches so that the tendon keeps it hanging to allow me to trim the rest of the meat off the hind quarter while it's hanging. I just prefer it to be hanging so that I can reach things better without bending over.
Is there any more worry about cutting through the spinal column? I mean, I used to get a neck roast all the time, and at this point, I just don't do it anymore. But you can go around the neck without cutting through the spinal column or the neck and get that meat off, make a roast, boneless roast. But is there any fear of that anymore?
Well, we haven't found chronic wasting disease in Kentucky. It's in 7 states around us.
Yeah.
So the spinal fluid, the brain, you know, those are all areas that can contain high levels of prions. So yes, we don't recommend cutting through the spine and contaminating the spinal fluid.
Okay, good. I just want to be confirmed on that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, 2 questions in the chat, 2 for Joe, and then 1 I think either could be for Joe or Elizabeth. The first one, Joe, is it any different field dressing a buck from a doe?
Well, it's a good question. He definitely has different equipment. So you want to remove the genitals and the mammary glands of a doe because they, you know, if you're going to hang the meat, that's parts you don't need. The biggest thing people encounter with bucks are the tarsal glands, but the does have tarsal glands as well that they urinate across. And some of the old myths were to get rid of that as soon as you can because it'll make the meat taste bad. But in reality, if you're handling that and getting your knife on it, you're then contaminating the meat by using that same knife and touching other parts of the deer. So I avoid the tarsal glands as much as I can as far as touching them. It's okay to skin them off, but do it very carefully that you're not actually grabbing the tarsal gland itself. That's the dark, stinky ones that are right there at the hock on both bucks and does. Does that answer your question?
Okay, you can talk again. You're not-
One of my tips is with the tarsal glands is I always carry a small roll of duct tape, and I duct tape them from the top where if there's real dark urine down the leg, I start there and duct tape all the way down and cover both tarsals. So while I'm cleaning it, I don't get it on my clothes or any of the meat.
That's an interesting tip. I hadn't heard anyone mention that. I'd be afraid if I hung it up by the back legs and I had it duct taped, I'd be squeezing.
Well, I only do it in the field.
Okay.
In the field when I'm doing the gutting process, and then that way I can get it back without any tarsal fluid on me or anything, and I can work real between the legs. But then I get it back home and I take that off and hang it. Yeah.
Very good. Good tip.
All right, Joe. Ellen wants to know why hang it by one leg and not both.
Well, the biggest thing, I mean, you could hang it by both legs. It's a little bit of overkill. It's really not needed to skin the animal. And hanging it by one leg allows those legs to separate and cool off quicker. If you had a gambrel and you're able to separate the legs, it's just a little bit, for me, a little bit more of a hassle to hang it by both legs because I don't have a good gambrel.
You're pretty much, when you talk about hanging, you're hanging in the field, aren't you?
Well,
Or are you hanging in?
no, I'm hanging it in my yard.
Gosh.
I did see a question come up there about the gamey taste.
Yeah.
If you handle deer quickly and properly, I don't notice a gamey taste. If you're able to avoid those tarsal glands, if you're able to get it cooled off quickly, it doesn't taste gamey to me. I think more people that have an issue with the gamey taste, they typically like their beef well done, so they're overcooking the venison, and then it sort of has a bit of a off taste, in my opinion. So I have to ask, if you're experiencing gamey taste venison, do you cook it well done?
While we're waiting on a response there, I'm going to jump over to the other question we got. And Elizabeth, this is probably for you, although I think either one of you could probably answer it. Along those same lines, is there a way to tenderize venison to make it not quite so chewy, is what they're asking.
Well, can you hear me? Okay. I think part of it is really the way you cook it. Like Joe said, and I mentioned earlier, you can't cook venison the same way that you would cook a beef. I know the old adage with cooking venison is low and slow, and for a long time, cooking for a long time. And I think of, now you can't do a whole piece of meat like this, but canning venison is a great way to make it tender. It tastes like the most tender meat, and it doesn't even taste like venison, really. I know that's not an easy thing to do, just go can your venison. But recipes that's low and slow, I think, is the trick to making it not tough. And really, that's kind of with any meat.
Well, hanging it, and letting it age can tenderize it. there's no doubt about it, but unlike beef, venison doesn't have the marbling and the fat through it, so it's has a tendency to dry out really quickly if you're trying to age it. Some people will age it in a cooler of water. That can be effective, but that can also have issues with bacteria.
Like a cooler.
Like a cooler, and changing the water on it, ice
No,
water every day.
I mean a walk-in cooler.
A walk-in cooler. Yeah, if you've got a
You
walk-in
can
cooler,
get it there to hang it. Because I've never had one that tasted weird,
right?
but they
No,
have always hung. Does that make a difference in
does-
it
it does
being
make a
tough
difference.
and
it certainly makes a difference. It's not something that people talk about. The old ruddy bucks just aren't worth eating. I've not experienced that. I mean,
I've not had anyone taste bad. And that tarsal gland, I know I rolled all up in that guy last year and I never smelled it, or I don't know. But I was all up in there.
And you know,
Does
one
that-
thing
Go ahead, Liz.
I was just gonna say, one thing that Joe alluded to is, you know, basically cooling that animal down and getting it cool as fast as you can. For me, you know, thinking of a food safety perspective, you know, it's an animal, and then it's kind of a blurry line of, okay, when does it stop being an animal and when does it start becoming food? You know, those cuts of meat. So thinking about not only cooling the animal down quickly, but getting those cuts of meat, however it might be, cooled down and in your refrigerator or freezer, you know, packaged properly, definitely makes a difference too.
so someone mentioned the silver skin, and yes, the silver skin can make it have an off taste. But just it being there isn't what makes it an off taste. I think as you prepare your meal or you're ready to cook your back straps or your round steaks or whatever cut it is you're preparing, if you trim the silver skin off of it, then it's fine. I prefer to leave that stuff on it and trim it off after I get it out of the freezer. So if something freezer burns, it's the silver skin and not what I want to eat. Many ways to skin a cat.
In all kinds of animals. So I have the perfect, I think, but I mean, it's my question. So I'm going to say it's the perfect question for you two. We have a wildlife biologist. We have a wildlife culinary specialist here. And you alluded to this, Elizabeth. And so, yeah, that gray area. And Elizabeth, tell me that the rule of thumb with meat is not to be over 40 degrees for more than 4 hours, correct?
Yes, good
So,
job.
thank you. I think I learned that from you. So yeah, when is that time? I mean, you asked the question. It's not really my question, but when is that time that it goes from animal to meat? Is it when the heart stops beating, or is it sometime thereafter? What time do you go? Okay, this is we've gone from critter to cuts of meat here. We need to start
It's
thinking.
food when it's standing out in the field.
I'm bacteria growth wise, Donna.
I think probably once the meat is in a form that you would cook it. Okay. So if there's, you know, it's the whole, you know, ham, if you would cook it that way, then that's when it's food. If it's, you know, the individual cuts, then that's when it's food. But of course, and you know, Joe talked about this too, you know, you want to treat it as food, you know, right when you start cutting that animal, that first cut that you make, you want to treat it as food and be obviously very careful with it. So yeah, I'm not sure when, you know, when exactly becomes food, but I think
my opinion on that is once it hits rigor mortis, then it becomes food. You know,
Which is usually how many hours after?
It depends on temperature, but
Okay.
it can be within 30 minutes.
If the temperature outside is say 50 degrees, then you're in danger of losing that meat. Am I correct? If you can't find it at like right away. The warmer it is outside, the faster your meat is probably
Correct.
gonna,
And it's a factor of the animal not cooling down quick enough.
yeah.
So, from my perspective, if I harvest, if I shoot a deer and I know I made a fatal hit, I'm not waiting 2 hours to look for that animal. I'm going fairly quickly and recover that animal and take care of it. I've seen deer, that people shot fatally with a 50-degree night, that simply weren't edible the next morning. They were already sour, is the way we talk about that. When you cut into the meat and it's got that just a sour smell to it, yeah, it's not safe.
Yeah.
And it would definitely taste gamey. And
Awesome.
likewise, I've seen people put a deer in the back of their truck right over top of their muffler, and they drive around, half the day showing it off. Hair still on it. With that coat is so insulating that that's one of the first things I do. I know a lot of people in colder climates like to leave a deer hanging with the skin on it. Around here, it's very seldom that you can do that. You want to cool that meat off. Get the skin off.
Exactly right. I think the most important thing to do, and whether you've got it, if you're in the field and or have a cabin, a garage or whatever, getting that coat off, the hair off, the hide off is the most important thing as quickly as possible. And then you can put it in one of the game bags if you're worried about contamination. But to me and my brothers, cooling that meat down is the most important thing to make it tender. And so the game bags are a real plus to buy. They're cheap and you can pull them right up over after the hide's off, and they get a nice breeze through the meat.
And when you're doing the gutless method, pillowcases are awesome. Old pillowcases are awesome for transporting those loose pieces where you've done the gutless method in the field.
Yeah.
I never let my wife throw away pillowcases.
The only time I've ever done the gutless method was out in Montana elk hunting. We had up on a mountain, but I've never done it here in Kentucky. I've been able to retrieve my deer with a 4-wheeler or pack it out to the cabin. But that gutless method is really nice.
All right, folks, we've got 3 more minutes. Anybody else have any questions for Elizabeth or Joe while we're for the last 3 minutes? No?
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, Elizabeth and Joe, both of you, thank you so very much. Let me see if I can end the spotlight here. Maybe not. There we go. There we go. Yeah. Oh, yep. Getting a whole lot of thank yous in the chatter. Thank you all very, very much. This has been, I learned at least a couple of things today. The pepper, Joe, that was interesting. Never heard that before. I think I saw the same reaction out of Elizabeth that I had when you mentioned that, keeping flies away. Very, very interesting stuff. Thank you all very, very much. And folks, I will be sending you all a survey via email tomorrow. Make sure you fill it out and let everybody know what a horrible job I did and what a wonderful job Elizabeth did. And so make sure you fill that out and help us do better for you in the future. And let's see here. Make sure you sign up for the last 2 webinars in the series. Thank you all very, very much for joining us tonight, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.
Yeah.
Good hunting.
Happy cooking.
Okay.